Welcome to Discover Dorico for August 2022. I was contacted recently by somebody who teaches how to use notation software, and they said, I'm not as quick in Dorico as I am in some other software. And they sent me a video and they said, here's an example when you're using plugins and using things as fast as you can, how quick it can be to do this notation. And I'd like to be this quick in Dorico. How do I do it? And in their example video, they had an example bit of music and they completed it in 1 minute and 25 seconds. So I said, okay, let's see what we can do to speed things up for you in Dorico so that you can do things that quickly. So that's what today is about. Can you all still hear me? Is everything okay? I think we're good to go now. So the example that I'm going to work on today is going to be this one above my head. So this is the snippet they were working on, and they were saying, I think this was an example so that they could say, here's some notation, so actual drum notation, here's some repeat bars and specific ways of doing those, here's some slashes, bits of extra text, a cue, and some slashes with stems as well as without, and extra lines, and laissez, vibre, slurs, or ties, and dynamics, and all those kind of things. So they wanted to know is, right, how do we do this as quickly as possible? So that's what we're going to do. And what I want to know is, can I do it quicker than 1 minute and 25 seconds? And can you beat my time? So that's the challenge for today. If you like this kind of thing, subscribe to the channel. Click the bell icon to be notified and you'll find out about all future videos we do too. So in this, let's say I'm going to start from the Steinberg hub. We'll start right at the very beginning, a very good place to start. And if you want to follow along, then you can do. So I'm just going to leave all the the normal stuff on, press create project. We'll start with an empty project. What I'm going to do to start off with is say, right, here's how you configure the project to be specific for the type of drum notation you want to do. In this particular case, I'm going to use this as my, how I want to configure Dorico, but it's not the defaults. So how do we configure that? And then also, I guess, how you do that quickly the next time so you don't have to set up all of these things again. So how do you reuse those settings in multiple ways? So that's what we're going to do. Thank you on the comments to say all as well. Let me know if you have any questions in there, and I'll try and answer those either as we go or at the end. So I'm going to start off. Actually, this example, they also have a little trumpet line in here and a bass part on the bottom. So let's just add those quickly. So add a single player. Let's have a trumpet, and we're going to need, of course, a drum kit. And I'm also going to need a bass, guitar, and I'm going to use the 4-string one like that. I'm going to go into write mode. You can see some of my shortcuts down the bottom. I'll try and remember as we go. I'm going to switch into galley view, which you can do from the view menu at the top up here. And you can choose galley view. You can also choose it from the bottom, except it's behind me, down here. So down here you can choose galley view from here. And you can also use a shortcut, of course, which is Command, really, I shouldn't say Apple anymore. Command Alt or Command Option 1 and 2 is to galley view and 1 is page view. So we're going to start here and just put these notes in that we need. So at the beginning here, there's a tempo of Q equals 112, or you can say 6 if you prefer. I've got a shortcut to turn off the signposts. If you don't have one, then you can use the signpost option here for hide signposts. Make yourself a shortcut, very useful, that one. I'm going to choose this bar line, do Shift B, double pipe to enter the double bar line there, and there's one at the end of bar 9. I'm going to put the notes in for the trumpet here, which will need to be... oops, my keyboard's in the wrong octave. Like that. They're showing in transposed pitch. Oh dear. Oh dear, schoolboy error. Look, I've put all the notes in wrong because of the way my keyboard's set. Never mind. Let's do it like that. So we've got these notes in, and then we've also, these have accents. I won't tell you how to do all these bits. I'm presuming you'll know all of these bits. And then the bass part down here, we'll want to use a little bit of, so let's put the whole bass part in so we can start with the same file that they had on the example video I was sent. So I want to put something like this. There we go. Now these bits are all add a dot, full stop or period to make those dotted rhythms. We've got some articulations here. Are we nearly done? Yep. And then when there's a dynamic here, so Shift D and add the dynamic and one at the beginning. Right, so now we've got a place to start. So we've got the same example that they have for those. So now what we want to do is create this drum part and all of the things that we're going to need to do this. So if you're starting from a generic Dorico project, you should be starting basically in the same place I am. You may be using this in in another project, so that's fine too. So we're going to start with this drum kit part here. Now when you're entering drum notation in Dorico, and I turn on the caret line, if you can move up and down, and you can choose all the options of the kit, so you get a small caret line on there. Now you could use a new QWERTY keyboard, so your normal computer keyboard, and if you press F then you'll get an F, and if you press C then you'll get a snare drum, etc., etc., depending on how your kit is configured. That's that's how it would work. I'm just going to undo that. Now for speed, I would recommend a MIDI keyboard for this, because for this kind of thing, where actually you've got two things going on at the same time, it means you can play them in basically, not with a metronome, you don't need to, but you can play those in basically as chords from your MIDI keyboard. Even if you've only got a 2-octave MIDI keyboard, that would be enough to do, to do this kind of thing with drums, and it would certainly be advisable from a speed point of view. The other thing is that for this kind of thing, you may want to configure how the drum kit is done, but you don't necessarily have to start at the beginning. So I'll show you what I mean. If I turn the caret line on here and I choose quaver or eighth note, so that's shortcut 5, then I can use my MIDI keyboard and play that rhythm in. So it's not in any particular time, but just each time I press a note, then it's going to wait for me like that. So you can enter all of those notes basically at the same time. So I'm using the C, 2 octaves below middle C, is my bass drum, E is my snare drum, F sharp is my closed hi-hat, and if I needed it, B flat would be open hi-hat. And that's because it's following the general MIDI drum mapping, or actually the Yamaha XG drum mapping, which if you're a kind of MIDI keyboard drummer, it's a useful thing to know. It's just, it's one of those things. In Dorico, in the preferences, so if you go to the Dorico menu in preferences, or edit preferences on a PC, in the note input and editing section down here, there's an option for when you're doing percussion input into kit or grid, and you can use percussion map or use staff position. If you prefer to use your MIDI keyboard and think F on your MIDI keyboard, C on your MIDI keyboard for your drums, then use staff position, do it that way. But I use the percussion map, so I'm using different keys for when I'm entering things. But your choice, but use a MIDI keyboard is going to be the fastest way of entering these. You don't need to worry about voices and stem directions. All of that kind of thing is sorted for you. So let's have a look at how we make this example instead of the example I've got by the default in Dorico. So we go to the setup mode here, and we expand the drum kit, and we click on these little 3 dots, and we say Edit Percussion Kit. So in here, this is our Edit Percussion Kit. Percussion Kit editor. I can click on the snare drum, and at the moment it stems down, and I want it to be stems up, and I've done this in some other videos, so I'll click stems up. Oh, and just behind my head is the apply button. So I'll press apply. So now it's changed the direction of the snare drum, so that's okay. You could also, for example, if you don't like hi-hats being up here, you can move them. You just drag them to another line or space. So if you drag the hi-hats here and press apply, then underneath down here, my hi-hats now are on the E space instead. If that's where you prefer them, put them there. So define the drum kit. The important thing here for speed is define the drum kit how you want it. Also, for this kind of notation, you're going to want slashes, probably with and without stems, depends on your choice. So I'm going to add both. I'm going to add 1 slashes with stems and 1 without stems. They appear on the B line by default. You can move them if you want to, but you probably don't want to. So the slashes with stems here and the slashes without stems. I'm going to leave them in the up stem voice. I don't always want them to have stems up, but I'm going to leave them in that voice because generally you'll get less, you'll get less rests and that kind of thing, and things to tidy up. So even if you don't want them like that, I'll show you later when we flip stems how you can sort those out, but leave them in the up stem voice. Also, if you have both of these, relabel them. So click Edit Names, and at least the short name, label them. So this is with stems, call it, WS, whatever you want to call it. This is without stems. So I'm going to say, let's say, I don't know, without stems like that. So that I've relabeled them, and that will be important when we, in a bit later, when we come to use them with the caret, because we can actually see which one's which. So in my case, all I've changed for this example is the direction of the snare drum for the stems. So it's hands stems up, feet stems down. I haven't moved my hi-hat this time. And I've added to the slashes, and I'm just going to press close. So I've now edited my kit, and it's done that down here. So that's the first bit, is kind of speed-wise, is set up the kit the way you want it. I'll show you later how you get that into other projects as well. So now I'm going to go back to right mode, and actually these two actually just need to be crotchets, quarter notes. So that's the very first bit. Now so far I'm not doing well for 1 minute and 25 seconds, am I? But we'll come to that later on. So now I can press, select this bar here. I'm going to press Shift and select this bar here. And I'm going to do Shift R. I'm just going to say %. And that's going to give me the repeat bar. And it does actually play back. I'm not too worried in this case, but it does play back. Depending on what you want here, I think in the original video I was sent, there was actually a repeat number. So it said 2, 3, 4 on every bar. So depending on your preferences, in engraving options, you can change this for the bar repeat section and the show bar repeat count. So you can say what the visual style is, but also how often. So if you want it every bar, just change that to 1 and then press close. And here we have a number on each of these here, like this. Okay. Then for the next bit, what we're going to need to do, actually the other thing you can do with these is if you don't want to change the global option, so if this was still 4 but you only want to change it for drums, just this part or just this individual case, in the properties panel, so command 8 at the bottom, you can say that the count frequency is 1, and you can change it just on an individual basis there in the properties panel as well. So your choice how you want to change it, but you get the choice either way. For the next 2 bars, so these two here, I'm going to Shift select, so I've got both of these selected, and I'm just going to press Shift R again. This time I'm going to type slash, and that will give me a slash region. Now slash regions also exist on the bottom right hand corner over here in the repeats section. If you scroll down, then you've got rhythm slashes, and you've also got bar repeat slashes, and you've got numbered bars down here. So you've got 3 individual options here that you can create if you want to do it that way. But for speed wise, I'd use the popover and do it that way. So we've got slash region and slashes and everything else we need. Okay. Now there's a little sim up here. So for this one, what we're going to need is the to be able to create some text. Now you could do it as a text item, and if you have multiple different words that you want to type, then doing it as a text item is probably a good idea. And if you were doing that, then you can just use the standard Shift-X text tool and you could type it in there. And if you're doing that and you want some different sizes and some different styles, then I think we've looked at before in a previous session about how you would configure those different styles so that you could have it as a different shortcut. So you could have box text, for example, with a particular shortcut on it. What you do is defining a paragraph style, and that's what this here is, it's a paragraph style. Defining a new paragraph style. When you define the paragraph style, click the little star. You can then add a keyboard command to it, so you've got a shortcut for it for that particular one. In this one, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do here is, because sim is probably something I'm going to want a fair number of times, I'm going to say it's probably best to do it as a playing technique. So on the right hand side over here, you have a look in the playing technique section, and in the common section, and I don't think in any of the sections at the moment, there isn't a sim, but we do want one in this case. So I'm going to press I'm going to move my head out of the way. Press the little plus, and I'm going to add a sim with a dot. So now I've got sim. I just pressed tab so that it activated that text. So it's put it in as text. It says sim. That's fine. I don't need it to play back with any particular thing. And the font it's going to use and size is the playing technique font. Now I noticed in this particular example, actually the sim is slightly smaller than the default style. So we don't want to change the default style. We just want to change that particular case for this sim. So what you want to do is in the library menu, this is a font style. And there is a font style already for the playing technique font. We've just seen that's the one that this style is using. So the playing technique font is size 11. I don't want to change all of them because I don't want all of these necessarily to change. If they do, just change it here. If they don't and you want a slightly different one, then press the duplicate button here. So I've got another one here, and I'm going to call this playing technique font small. I'm going to change the size. So let's say we want it to be, I don't know, 8 or something particularly small. So now, for my little sim here, let's add one to the score just about here. So for this little sim, if I edit it with a little pencil tool, again, it's behind my head, apologies, then I can say that the playing technique font for this is playing technique font small instead. So it's got a little bit smaller, and it gets a bit smaller on the page. So the advantage there is that that is then, if you've used it multiple times, you only have to change it once, and all of those would update. So for example, that actually is a little bit small even for what I wanted. So I can go back to the font styles. I can change this maybe up to size 9 instead. Press OK, and now it's size 9, and it's changed over here. So I would probably say make one of those, and I'll show you again later how we move those between different projects and reuse some of these items. But I've done it by making a font style of that particular size. So I've got my regular size for all of these other things, if that's what I want, and I've got a smaller one if there's a particular style that's a particular size. So the next bit over here, this bar, there's a couple of different ways you can do this. This one here, when I've done it, I've used the slash without stems. So if I turn on the caret line, you can see now this is the label that I put in earlier, slash with stems, and if I just press the up arrow, then I've got slash without stems, and that's what I want here. You can press any key you like, but the default key, if you like, is Y. You can actually press any pitch you like. Of course, some of them are going to be other drums, so just press Y. So I've entered those ones. Now, what I also want to do is enter this cue up here. I said there's multiple ways of doing this. If I just delete those, you could have just extended this slash region like this. I'm using Alt-Shift and the right arrow. If I extend that one, then I want to add this cue. Now the problem is I can't select this bar easily necessarily, because sometimes there are things, cues are fine, but for some things you want to do you can't. So you want to select, for example, a particular point, then you can break a slash region at any point just by pressing U, the letter U, which is the scissors tool, which is down here on the left. So a slash region, let me just press undo, is another way potentially of doing this. But in this particular case, I used the slash without stems, added 4 of those, selected this bar, and then the notes from here to get them use the cues option. So if I do Shift U, I can start typing trumpet, select the trumpet with the down arrow, press enter. So now I have the trumpet cue. Now, if there are global things you want to change with cues, especially rhythmic cues like this one, then again in the engraving options, so Command-Shift-E or Control-Shift-E, in here, if you look at the cues section, then there's various things that you can change, including the size of cues and whether articulations show and all those kind of things. But there's a rhythmic cues section, and in here you can set the distance from the staff. So you see here, this one's slightly above the staff, whereas this one here in the example I was asked to copy was sat on the staff. So I just changed this to 0, press apply, and that's a global change then for all of the rhythmic cues that will change there. Let me just check. I think I'll come on to that in a second. So I'll hopefully come on to that in a second. Yes, the other thing that you want to change with this particular cue, and this is a unique change, so you want to do it in the properties panel, is while this label's selected, and if you've deselected it, just select the label, which is actually the cue itself as well. You want to go to the start text. You don't have to activate it, just click in the box and type BRS for brass, so that you get the same cue that they've got there. So you don't have to copy and paste anything, you're just literally creating a cue, adding the text, and that's done. And the change you've made in the engraving options can be done as a an option that always exists on your computer, so that you don't have to change that one again. Your rhythmic cues would always sit at that position. For the next bar, we actually want the rhythm from the bass part, which was down here. So if I take these notes here, then I can copy them into the bass part. Oh, I said I'd ask that question, sorry. Rhythmic slashes are designed to hide notes behind them. So if you have put any notes in here, oops, it'd help if I'd started my carrot. If you put any notes in here, then slash regions are designed to hide the notes behind them. You'll still hear them, but the slash regions are designed to hide them. But what you will find usefully is that they won't hide a cue. So you could, in this case, you could actually use a rhythmic cue. You can use notes. In this particular case, where it's only a cue in that bar, it doesn't matter either way. But just in case you are doing an example with other notes, I've used actual slash notes in that particular case. So this bar here, sorry, bar 8. So I'm going to alt click the bass part into here. It happens to have added it in as a bass drum, which in this case I don't want. I want them to be slashes. So if I press Alt up once, it's going to move them up to the next thing in my kit, which happens to be a tom. If I press Alt up again, it would move them to the snare, and I want them to be slashes. So actually what you want to do from this position is press Alt. In fact, you might know Alt Shift, and if you're on the snare, for example, you can go down the various different techniques that the snare has. But if you're here and you say Alt Command, well, Control, then you can move them into the slash region option. So that's change those notes, just move them into the slash region instead. So basically from where they were, let me just go back a lot. Undo, undo, undo. So from here, all I've done is Alt up, Alt Command up, and I've got them as slashes. And now because they're in there, but I want them to be stems down, I just press F and it will flip the stems on them. And don't worry about these two, and this one in particular, because we're about to change those. So you could change the last two into slashes without stems. However, you've got two voices going on then, which I don't really want at this point, and you then have to add this tie as a laissez vibre tie, and the length might be right, might not, etc., etc. So actually, in this case, I think what's easier to do is to kind of minimum number of things you have to do and voices you have to think about or anything else. If you go to select these notes, go to engrave mode, I'm going to select both of these. Then in the properties panel at the bottom, there's an option to hide stem. So if you turn that on, I'm actually only using one slash voice, it's just I've turned the stems off for a couple of them. And that's probably a quicker way of doing it. So that's that bar with the slashes in it, I think for speed is probably one of the quicker ways to do it. When I've gone back into write mode, it's now selected all of those because this is a tie chain. And I now want to add this fill line over the top. So when you go to the lines menu over here, we don't have one with text on it by default. In fact, I'm just in the way, aren't I? There we go. So there are lots of options in here, but what you want to do is create your own. So if you scroll down and click on this little pencil tool, then you can create your own lines. So there's some long dashed lines, there's some short dashed lines, and I think we want this one, a dashed line short with an inward pointing hook. So that's this little hook here at the end. Obviously, it's not going to be this long, but the short is the length of the actual little line in there itself. So I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going to say that this is going to be a dashed fill line, short with an inward pointing hook. And what we actually want to do is add the word fill at the beginning. So the start cap, you'd think, is the thing you want, but there isn't any text in here because obviously that needs defining first. So if you click on this line annotation editor here, opens this little window for editing the line annotations, and in the text section there is nothing. So if you press the little plus, you can add yourself an option in here, and I want one called fill. You can call yours Jeff, Fred, whatever you like, Bob, but mine's called fill. So we've added some fill text, and the default is actually the baseline is going to sit in the right place and everything else. I don't actually need to change anything. There are plenty of options in here, have a play, but you only need to do this once. So I'm going to add those, which means that now in the start cap section, I can now add fill. So now we've got fill sat on the bass line with the dotted lines and the hook at the end. So I've now got my line that I need. So I'll press OK. And in my lines menu here, I now have my fill line. So with these notes selected, I can just click on that and I get my fill line. And the useful thing there is that it's all now part of the line. itself, and you've made that new item. So it's a much easier reusable thing, and I'll show you how we reuse that later. There are options, again, if you individual cases, there's all sorts of things you can add at the bottom here if you need to tweak individual lines. But in this case, I think for speed, and if you're doing this kind of thing a lot, you want to define one or more of these lines with the options that you want on them, especially this one that says fill, and define those as line options here. And then I'll show you how you can move that between projects at the end. Yeah, there's a quick question. How do we add a traditional half open circle with a diagonal slash and use it easy? So similarly with, when we added this sim, I've made a new playing technique for that, and I'll show you in a bit how we also get that between various projects. But you can add them into any section. So if in your unpitched percussion you don't have something in here that you wanted, then you can add a new item into here. There's a little plus item. Oh, it's behind my head again. I should get out of the way. There's a little plus item. You can add items into there, and I'll show you how you can move those between projects in a bit. So the next bit in this last bar, if I double click to get my caret line on, I can just on my MIDI keyboard hit 2 keys at the same time. And if they're the right 2 keys, then I get a bass and a crash cymbal. Now this top note here also needs a little laissez vibre tie. Or slow, some people say. So if I go to the properties panel, you can turn it on here. It is a tie. But opening the properties panel and doing that when you need to do a lot of these is a bit annoying. So don't do that. What you do instead is once go to the preferences. Command comma is or control comma is the quick way into preferences. Go to key commands, search for laissez, find the toggle for this and set yourself a shortcut. Anything you like. Mine used to be on my UK keyboard, the key to the left of Z, but that's now used for hide invisibles in Dorico 4, so it's now Shift and the key to the left of Z, which handily happens to be tilde, and that's why it's sort of a little tilde. That's what I want. So that's my shortcut. I've also added, because some people prefer to do it this way, a jump bar alias, which is LV, which means I can either now, when I have a note selected, I can either press J for jump bar and just type LV, and I'll get that, or I can just press my shortcut, which I said is tilde, and that will turn on and off the laissez vibre tie. So that's one a recommendation for me, I think, for doing those. And then I think the last thing we need to do in this section is the dynamics. So if you choose one of the dynamics at the beginning, like the bass guitar here, and then you use select more, which is Control Shift A or Command Shift A. I'll just do that slower because it pops up on the screen like that. So now that's selected all of the same type of items. So instead of choosing things and then filtering dynamics, choose one of those items, a dynamic, and press select more. That selects all of the dynamics. So now I can just alt click at the beginning up here for the drums, and it will copy all of those dynamics in to the drum part. Actually, the hairpin was already there, but even if the hairpin wasn't there, deletes hairpin. When you do this, do select more, and then you can copy them up here. And I like select more instead of choosing a particular filter, because select more is one shortcut to remember, and you can use it for all sorts of things. You can select more notes in the same voice, you can do more notes in the same chord, more notes in the same bar, more items, more lyrics in that system. It's a very, very useful shortcut. It exists up here as select more, but use the shortcut because that's much, much quicker. So that's the example that I was given. And in another notation program, then it was then, the idea was, how do we do this kind of thing in Dorico and make it quick? Because in the example I was sent in the video of another program using plugins and various other things, it took 1 minute and 25 seconds. So I wanted to see, could I do it quicker? Now, doing it live, especially since I've had technical problems at the beginning with the echo and everything else, I thought what I'd do is cheat, and I've done a video of it. So here is a little video of me doing this whole thing. So let's go back to the beginning of the video. You can see the drum part here that I'm copying, so that I had something to visually check, because that was the same as in the video I was sent. If you want to have a look at that, it's on YouTube. And basically it's the same example. So it's got the bass guitar part, it's got the trumpet part, that's it. And we're making the drum set part from the beginning from here. Can I do the drum set part in quicker than 1 minute and 25 seconds? So let's press play, and I'll tell you what I'm doing as we go, quick. So at the beginning, we're using a MIDI keyboard and we're playing all of the notes at the same time on the MIDI keyboard and then just changing those two to be quarter notes. Then we select bars 2 to 4 and we use the repeats option to add the repeat region. And we're using the same option, the Shift R, to add the slash region and then Shift P to use the sim text. I've added the slashes, I've created the trumpet part as a cue. I'm changing the label down here so it says brass because it's all the brass that are doing the cue, not just the trumpet. Then selecting the bass part, copying that, Alt up, Alt Command up, and flip for the stems on there. Then I'm adding the last two notes with the MIDI keyboard again, choosing that one and pressing the shortcut for laissez, vibre. Choosing this note, going to engrave mode, choosing the other note as well because I want both of them, and changing the properties for hide stem. And then going back to the lines, so I can add the line that we've created earlier, and then choosing the dynamics, select more, copy those to the drum part. Ta-da! So that video is 59 seconds. That's the actual time. It's not sped up. That's the time it took me to actually do it. So in Dorico, without using plugins, if you've got things set up the way you want them, which of course you're going to have, create those things once, which is the same in any program, you know, creating those things that you want, the fill line, the text, the size you want it, everything else. Once you've done that once, creating drum parts in Dorico can be actually quicker than in any other program. Now, I'm sure you're now thinking, well, there's an example I've got of XYZ. Send me the example. Let's have a look at how we can quickly do those as well, if you like. I can, send it to discoverdorico@steinberg.de as an email. I'll have a look at those, and I can tell you this is how I would quickly do that example, for example. But I hope you can kind of see that actually you don't really need to use. We haven't needed to use any plugins. We've used some actual features. Yes, occasionally I've used the properties panel for things. But it's still quicker in Dorico, I think, than in many other programs. Can you do it quicker in any program? Let me know. discoverdorico@steinberg.de. But yes, yeah, absolutely, let me know. And can you do it quicker in Dorico than I can? There's a couple of things I've thought, you know what? I could have done that quicker. For example, like I said, earlier on, you could have done these slashes as a slash region. So, is the same slash region instead? That would probably save me some time. But, are there other things that, that you think you can do and you can do that example quicker? Now, Max Verstappen speed, somebody's written. Now, the other thing here is you want to reuse these things. You don't just want to set up a project and then spend a while every time you're doing this, setting up the same things in another project. So, now we've got this example, how do we reuse these elements? And there's a number of different cases, I think, of how you would want to do that and why. So the first is, if you've got all of the instruments you want, you've got the layout you want it, the drum kit's set up, all of the playing techniques and everything else, and if it's all of the instruments and everything that you've got, and that's what you want to use every time. For example, you've done a big band template, and you said, this has everything I want in it, and this is what I want to use next time I do a project. Then what you'd want to do is you want to go to the File menu, and you do Save as Project Template. And what this will do, you can give it a category if you don't already have one. I don't have any categories at the moment, and give it a name. That will save this project with, none of the, the notes or anything else, but it will save that as a template in the hub. So when you start here, you would then have a new template section down here with your name on it, or whatever you called it, and your template inside it. So that would be your start point, so you don't have to create all of those extra items and everything else you do, because it would be your template with everything in it. So that's okay if that's the way, if that's the way you're working. If you're working on another project that's, I don't know, you've already started on a project, you didn't start from that template, and then you think, oh, I want that drum kit, but I want the kit definition that I've already set up with the slashes in it and the stems in the right direction, etc., etc. If you take this drum kit that you've done, so in your Edit Percussion Kit dialog here, there's an Export Kit. So if you press this button, you can save yourself a file with your drum kit definition in it. And then when you next start a project, so let's say we haven't started from a template, we've just started from one of the Dorico default ones, or you've been sent a file from somebody else and you want to put your kit in it. When you go to add a player, instead of choosing a drum kit from here, so I normally type drum and start here, don't start there. What you do is, from this dialog, press import kit. from the import kit dialog, choose your kit. So this is my hands up, feet down. So now it's imported my drum kit that I've just set up earlier. And when I go to edit percussion kit, I've got my slash voices already in there. My snare drum is already stems up instead of stems down. And if you'd moved the hi-hats or added any extra things, they would all be in there. So that would be your kit that that you've set up. So you only have to do it once, export it, and you're then good to go with your drum kit in here. So that's another option, is importing and exporting the kit into other projects. But that only helps you with some things. Another option might be that somebody else is sending you some music as a Dorico file, and you have your template that you've set up. So let's say, your template file or whatever that you've set up. What you can also do is you can do file import flows. You can choose their Dorico project that they've sent you, and you can choose to import that one on a per flow basis. You can choose a flow from that project that they've sent you and import it into your project, at which point you've got your instruments that you want and your lines that you've created and your playing techniques and those kind of things. So that might be another way to go, depending on what they're sending you or anything else. Importing and exporting flows could also be another useful option. But what happens if you're then working on a project where somebody else has sent you a project which has all of the other instruments done, and it's got basically finished? The page templates are done, everything else is done, and you think, but for speed, all I want is my lines and my playing techniques, and those kind of things. How do I just get those into this project? So what you would do is, in fact, let's just go to that other project I just started. So far, I've got my drum kit, but I don't have, from the right menu here, I don't have my sim playing technique. Oops, my sim playing technique isn't here, and my fill line isn't here. Those were the two examples we did, and this could be the hi-hat that somebody asked me about earlier and that kind of thing. So for all of those things, how do you get those into the project? And the answer now in Dorico 4 is the library menu and the library manager. So here is the library manager. And at the moment, you can do comparisons of things. So you can compare the factory settings. Pardon me, I just hit the microphone again. You can compare the factory settings with your user library. Your user library is the settings that you have by default. So if you've changed things in engraving options, in layout options, in notation options, and you've pressed the save button at the bottom, those are your settings, and they may differ from the factory settings, which was when Dorico was first installed. So you've got those two options, the Dorico defaults, your user library settings, which are more likely what you want, but there may be things that you want to bring into this project from somewhere else. So what you can then do is find the Dorico project, or your center Dorico project, but in this case, you'll find the Dorico project with your drum kit in it, with your playing techniques in it, with your lines in it, and you drag that Dorico project into this little box here. So here's a drums in a minute file, which I know has the right things in it that I want in this project. So now what I'm comparing, especially if I press differences, is I'm comparing the drums in a minute with the project I have open. So the cues that I changed earlier, if I expand this, I changed the distance from the space above the staff from 2 to 0. Do I want that? Yes, I do. So I'll bring that in. I also changed the font styles. So when I click on font styles here, it says some of these options differ. The horizontal line font and the playing technique font smaller, which is the one I made earlier. So I'm going to bring that one in. I also want to bring in the lines options. So the fill line I created has an annotation, and there was a body style change and the line style. So I just bring in those three changes. There may be note heads you want to change or music symbols. In my case, I also want to bring in the paragraph style. No, it wasn't paragraph styles. It was the playing techniques that I'd changed. So that was the sim that I made, and also I've done the font styles, and what was there anything else that I changed? I think that was it. If there are paragraph styles, you can bring those in, but you can see you're choosing not to bring everything from that project in, but just those specific things, because you don't want to disrupt too much in this file. What you just want to do is add a few things that will be useful for you for speed purposes. So this is just going to bring in the lines I've made, the playing techniques, the font style, which I'll need to make that smaller sim, And the other thing, the cues, so that they sit on the top. So I'm going to change those. So that's only the things I brought in. If I press apply and close, then you can see now in this new project, which I've imported my drum kit into, I've imported my fill line into, and I've imported this sim playing technique. So I've got all of those things that I've added, so that it then this project I could also do this at the same speed that I've just done the other one, without having to create those extra things. So you can save your file as a template. You can import and export your drum kit. You can import and export flows if that's useful, especially bringing something in from somebody else into your project. But also you can use the library menu and the library manager to change a project that you've got in front of you from wherever you've got it, to bring in things that you've done previously. Maybe they're chord definitions, lines, playing techniques, those kind of things. You can bring those into your project as well. So I think that hopefully shows you, drums in a minute. I know this is a bit longer than a minute because I've showed you all the detail, but now have a go. Can you do this same example that we looked at? Can you do this same example very quickly? Can you do it quicker than I can? I'd really like to know. What's the quickest time you can do it in? Try it in other software if you like, but I think Dorico, is going to be a very quick option for you to create all of these kind of things. So I will now say, effectively finish this session. I'm going to read the comments and just see if there's anything on there. So if you want to stay on for a minute, then please do, and I'll just check the comments. The categories in the hub, can you reorder them? I think they're always alphabetical. You could maybe be clever with numbers, maybe. I don't know. I think they're alphabetical, though. Somebody wanted to know, didn't get a great answer from the forum, how do you put bar numbers under regular notation in the drum kit part? I normally do this for slashes. I would have to see the example. I think that probably this isn't the best place to do it, but email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. Send me a little graphical example of that, and I'll work out what it is we need to do. I mean, maybe actually you want these basically, and I don't know, but underneath, I'm not sure. Anyway, but send me an example, and I'll have a look at those because it does say, I think, bar numbers. But anyway, how do you make a cymbal roll on cram drumsticks? Are they like chicken drumsticks? I'm afraid I don't have enough information. I'm not really that good a drummer. I'm not a drummer to know. Again, email me, discoverdorico@steinberg.de, and I'll have a look at that for you. I suppose one thing with cymbal rolls, if you're doing a cymbal roll and you wanted to end but not have the tremolo lines on the stem, then you can do that in engrave mode. If you switch to engrave mode, click on that last note in the properties panel, you can tell it not to have the tremolo lines on there, but that might not be the answer to your question. How can I make playback what has been recorded on the mod wheel, like a swell and a timpani? Normally the things that you apply on the mod wheel are in the play tab. It might be, depending on the drum kit, because drum kits are actually made up of all sorts of instruments. Just have a check in layout options for players. If you tell your percussion to be single line instruments, then you can see all of the individual bits of your drum kit. Now you can add dynamics in here, for example, that only apply to one instrument, that don't need to apply to the whole kit. And you can add dynamics in here, and they won't then show up in the score, but they will play back. So maybe, I'm not sure in your particular example, but try recording it just on that particular instrument in the kit in here, and then when you're finished, go back to layout options, go back to your 5-line staff. You should hear the changes that you originally made, and then obviously you won't need to see them. There's nothing to see in the drum kit part anyway, but you should still hear them. So try that. If not, email me and let's have a look. Is there a way in playback follows tacit 1? Unfortunately not. No, you can't say, only play this first time or second time. But really, with this kind of drum kit part, it's often not the kind of thing you want to play back anyway. You can. These will play back anyway by default, the repeat bar regions. You can hide playback things if you want to underneath slash notation. But often, this kind of drum kit part isn't the thing that's going to be in your mock-up for an audio version. What you might do is have two drum kit parts, one that plays back correctly, but doesn't need to look right, and one that shows correctly, and either choose which one you want to appear in the score, or you can use the manual staff visibility and you can hide the one that plays back, for example. I don't know. There's also potentially another session we could do on Importing MIDI drums, especially if there's a different percussion map that's used, so if it's Superior Drummer or a Native Instruments Contact drums or those kind of things, where maybe the drum kit mapping is different. I'm not going to look into those today because that's all playback stuff and this isn't a playback score. But for example, you know, depending on your playback template, or more likely depending on your percussion maps, you know, there's a Yamaha XG one that we commonly use for things, but you might have a different or you might need to create a different percussion map and the playback for those, and then there might be, you know, hi-hat open a quarter and open 3/4 or open half, you know, as well as fully open and those kind of things, and they can make a big difference to playback. So maybe there's something else we can look at, importing drum grooves that have those and showing the notation for them. I don't know how much people are doing that, but you know, let me know. Let's see what we can do on those. Let's have a look. There aren't any other questions at the moment, so if you think of anything afterwards, if you're not watching this session live, why not? No, if you're not watching this session live, no problem. Shortly after this session, I'll put time markers, they're called chapters, at the bottom so that you can jump to various things. So you can jump to the point when you can see how quick you do this and you can time yourself and see if you can do it in less than 59 seconds. Or you can jump to a particular bit about slashes or something else. But if you've got any questions, then after this session, email me on discoverdorico@steinberg.de. And it'll also be very, very useful to know, what else would you like to see in one of these sessions? Are there other tips and tricks that you would like to know on, or a particular style or anything else? I've been promising to do something on big band for a while, so we should probably do one of those, and a big band score, a bit like the Entering a Symphony one we did, but maybe for a big band score. But I've also got some playback stuff to look at on those, and some expression maps and playback templates for big band libraries, so I need to do a bit of work on those as well. So there's already a vote on the chat for importing drums, so yes, that could well be an option. So email me or write comments underneath this video on what you would like to see in another session. Thank you very much for joining. Sorry about the echo at the beginning. I'll see if we can edit that out. I think we probably can. And maybe we'll leave it in for fun. I'll see you next month. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And if you click on the little bell icon, then you'll be notified in the future when we do another Discover session or any of the Dorico videos that we have on our channel. So until, now there's a challenge in the chat. How fast are you on iPad? Now there's a challenge. Can I this example on iPad? To be honest, it's mostly the same. Tip number 1: use a QWERTY keyboard on the iPad if you want for speed for this kind of stuff. Tip number 2: get a MIDI keyboard and attach that to your iPad too, and then it's basically the same. Anyway, I digress. So until next time, thank you very much.